well, actually, what I was going to say actually is a little bit sexist because usually men will do this more so than women. You know, women have a different way of being assertive with men. You know, well, everything's different. I'm sure you've all lived long enough to understand what I mean. So, but in the case of women now, I don't know if it could be applied the opposite, but a man that is too interested too quickly in a relationship, you know, that's not usually common. I mean, from seeing just a picture of you, you know, I can see there actually are men who want relationships, but usually it's after they have met the person or at least have gotten to know them a little bit, you know. But if after one or two chats the man is already, and you haven't even met in person yet, the man is already talking about a serious relationship with you, it can be very exciting when you're young, especially if the man is extremely handsome, and you kind of get swept up in that excitement of the love. You know, we knew right away that we were meant for each other, all that stuff. It's wonderful when you're young. It's a feeling that it just makes you feel glorious, and I hate to say that women are more susceptible to that. You know, meet a man, he pretty early on sweeps you off your feet. It's a bad sign. I'm sorry. I hate to be so jaded, but I know from experience that if you're swept off your feet, it's a bad sign. So, you know, I know I'm not going to convince any of you. You know, people told me that too when I was young and I didn't listen, but I hope you will listen. But anyway, but even more so when he hasn't even met you in person and just from your picture is seeing how he just feels this special connection that he can feel it through the computer. And, you know, it's, first of all, one of two things. Either he's lying because he's a predator, you know, and I don't mean a predator necessarily that he's a dangerous person, but, you know, he's maybe going to try to get something out of you. Maybe quickly, he wants something quick and easy, you know, for his own, you know, sexual, you know, like a booty call. That could be maybe in the best case scenario. That's what he's trying for. Just, oh, I'll sweep her off her feet quick online so that when we meet, it'll be a quick, you know. I don't want to vulgarize it too much, but basically what he's doing, he's preparing you online, getting you all like romantic and in love online so that when he meets you, it'll be a quick sex on the first date, because the woman will already have been feeling a connection, you know, because since women do usually need a bit of a connection beforehand, he's getting it out of the way on the chat so that when you meet in person, he won't have to go through so much effort, you know, and he can be laying there home in his dirty underwear being romantic, you know. It's easier for him. So I hate to be so vulgar, but that's basically what it is. Whereas if he has to do all that part in person, he's got to get fixed up, he's got to shower, he's got to, you know, it's too much effort for him. Why not just, you know, get the hard part done online so that when you meet, you know, so that's what he's doing. That could be one thing that he's doing. The other is he could be, and now I'll tell you the case that happened with me. I'm going to kind of mix two men that I met online. We chatted. And both came on very strong very early in the chat. And, you know, fortunately by my age, I recognize. But even so, even at my age and even recognizing the warning signs, even so, I'll admit, I started to get a little swept away both times. And what saved me was I caught myself. I said, okay, don't do this again. Remember, getting swept away. It's like now I just have repeated it so much in my head that I'm very cautious now. And someone pointed out in my last video that if you're that cautious, you're never going to fall in love because, you know, you don't risk it. You don't want to risk anything. So that is true. By the time, you've been through the mill a few times. You maybe it is almost impossible at this point that I'll find someone and fall in love again for that reason, because I am so cautious, and I don't think I'm going to change at this point. But you do have to be somewhat cautious. I mean, I don't agree that 100% you just let loose and let destiny take over. No, you should go in with your eyes open so that you don't get into really bad situations that are hard to get out of. So while I'll agree you can go to the extreme where you're so cautious that you'll never be able to fall in love, you shouldn't go in blindly either and say, oh, I'll just see what happens. You maybe somewhere in the middle you gotta be. So, but anyway, so I was chatting with, I guess I'll take the first man that I was chatting with that did this to me, like right away in the chat, oh, you're so beautiful. And yes, we put attractive pictures of ourselves on there, so obviously you hope that someone will notice. So, and if you're a little lonely and all that stuff, it's a welcome, chat to, oh, you're so beautiful. They point out the qualities that you're proud of, that they can tell from the picture. Like if you're someone who's proud of your rear end, you most likely have a picture of yourself with your booty poked out. Or if you're someone who's proud of your, it's not wrong to be proud of your good features. So if you happen to have a beautiful face or pretty eyes, or you feel you do, it's evident in the picture because you're putting your best features right there. If you're proud of your physique because you go to the gym a lot and you have a picture of yourself in a gym outfit looking very, fit, it's going to be evident to the person that you're proud of that feature. So they kind of know from your pictures what you feel proud of. So first of all, they'll focus on that. Hey, you got a great physique, for example, because they saw a picture of you in your gym outfit or something, or if you have pretty eyes and they see that you've put a pretty picture of your face and with your eyes made up, they'll point to that. So they're going to notice that, and they're going to point to those features. Wow, you've got this, you've got great that, So and then they'll they'll be fishing a little bit. You might not even realize they're doing this, but and then these two particular men were very aggressive and tearing down any doubts that I would have put forward. It's like they're completely aggressive, like they're in charge. They're in charge. They are the one who is deciding, and they're a man. They're very manly. And while that's very sexy when a man is manly, to most of us, not when it's to the point of being aggressive, where if you say anything to the contrary, they sort of attack. It may not be, a direct attack where they're insulting you, but even to the point where they might it's sort of like they're trying to tear you down to keep you a little bit subdued. And if you're lonely and a little bit insecure, you'll usually cede to that. And he's the take charge man. And so the first guy that I met online, chatting, was already talking about passionate kisses on the beach. Kissing, nothing sexual, just, oh, we really need to kiss, and then we'll know that we'll feel that the connection, and I can tell that there's this connection. Just use your intuition. Again, my intuition was telling me, and intuition and experience. The guy, I found him very attractive physically in the picture, and he probably knows that these men that are very, very handsome, sometimes, they usually know that they are, and women do usually fawn over them. They're accustomed to that for their looks. And so they kind of play the role of the Marlon Brando. Watch A Streetcar Named Desire. Any of you who've never seen the movie A Streetcar Named Desire? It's an old movie. Marlon Brando. You know, that rugged, just animal type of man who's very aggressive is very sexy to many of us at first, you know. And you'll see in the movie, just watch the movie, how at first it's something so sexy and it turns into something very sinister, you know, at the end. But I don't want to ruin it for you, so just... And you start to see the holes in that character. He did not win an Oscar for that role. He was a young actor at the time. I think that was his first major role, Marlon Brando. I'm going off on a way tangent now. But I believe, you know, other people won Oscars for that movie, which I don't necessarily feel, some of them, you know, my personal opinion, but I've done a little acting in my past, and I know a little bit about acting and took a few courses, you know. So, you know, sometimes we take a course or two and we think we're experts, but, you know, analyzing some of the people who won Oscars for that movie, you know, I don't think necessarily that, you know, but they were more seasoned actors. So, you know, sometimes the Oscars is more of a political thing where, okay, this guy's been in the business for a while, let's give him an Oscar, or let's nominate him. But I honestly think that Marlon Brando should have won an Oscar for that role. He won an Oscar later on in his career, and he rejected it. Oh, he's such an interesting man. Just a very tragic sort of life, though, if you want to look. But he's just such a fascinating person as an American, you know, from an American history perspective. All right, I don't mean to stick on that, but so these men will come off like Marlon Brando in A Streetcar Named Desire. Stanley was the name of the character. Very just, you know, it just, whoa, you know, you just, that's the man you dream of in your worst nightmares. No, just kidding. So, you know, and he just really, so, okay, I chatted with him. I was feeling a little bit of the attraction there. And even he gets into you a little bit physically, you know, too, even through the chat. I mean, it was just really, it was happening. It was starting to happen, but then I stopped myself. I said, no, there's something wrong here. If you're feeling this connection too early, and he's encouraging a connection this early on, first chat, and talking about kissing, and do not, you know, rush into things. So we had set up a date to meet that Sunday. And I was trying to be very cautious. Okay, let's meet at this public place at this time. It was, you know, an early hour. It was like 2 in the afternoon. I wanted to make sure it wasn't at night. And in spite of feeling this physical because of things he said, and he didn't really even say anything sexual, so I don't want to mislead anyone. But, you know, the talk about kissing, we need to kiss, and then we'll really know that this is a connection, and you know, some other things he said, but just very assertive. And yes, I'm a businessman, I'm self-employed, I have my office on the beach. Self-employed, another warning sign. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Entrepreneurs are very, you know, they're very needed in our economy, and businessmen who start their own businesses, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm not tearing down small business people. But when all he has is in his profile, self-employed, you know, find out really what it is, and, you know, because it could be, you know, anything, you know, drug dealers are self-employed, you know, murderers, hitmen are self-employed. So I'm not saying that's what this guy was, but I'm just saying self-employed is a very broad term, so you got to find out what it is. So this guy was one of those self-employed people. And he talked to, and I actually don't remember in hindsight what his business was, but he, you know, said, I have an office on the beach, and, you know, he said something that he did for a living, and it sounded legitimate in the chat, you know, but of course you can say you do anything, and it sounds legitimate. So, so I had arranged that we were going to meet. that following Sunday. I think it was like maybe a Wednesday or Thursday that we started chatting. I wanted to chat with him a few times before actually meeting, to discard, so that way I could at the not to say at the last minute, but that way in case I could cancel. But I wanted to see if he was willing to actually meet in person, just to make sure he wasn't a catfish, and hopefully would chat with him a little bit before that. So after the first chat, that was my feeling I got. It was kind of, I don't really feel too comfortable about it, but I was feeling that I was attracted to him, but I wasn't comfortable about how quickly he was going for, getting into a relationship. And then the second chat also, it was a little too much. And when I tried to change this, when I tried to talk about other topics, he would lead me back towards whatever topic he wanted to talk about. And it was just too, he was a very aggressive man. Aggressive, and you can sense through chatting, and I'm a very good writer. I write very quickly. I mean, as far as even texting. And I write out my words. And so that's the thing also with older people. We don't use short things. Like for you, younger people use the letter U, and we older people usually chat in full sentences. We write out our words, Y-O-U, and especially someone like me who is very, I write a lot. I've always gotten good grades in English, grammar, and writing and all that. So, and this gentleman also did. So we were communicating very clearly through writing, through the chat. Which I guess maybe if you use short words you can too, but we almost chat as if we're conversing, like I am conversing now and writing out all the words. And so the second one also was looking, and I, at that point he didn't want to give me his last name. See, when they don't want to give you your last name, and also bear in mind, sometimes they will give you a name and it's a fake last name, so you can't really Google them. So usually everyone has something online about, even if it's just, the address, we have found a so-so in Florida. So you've got to determine if the name they're giving you. But I think at some point, let me think, I don't recall if I got his last name. I think I never did get his last name, but he had a business name, and I Googled his first name plus the business name, and doing a little of this and that, I found his last name. But now that I recall, he never actually gave me his last name. I think I asked him once, and I don't persist. I ask one, I kind of say, hey, what's your last name? If they don't want to give it to you, I don't push it, because then they're going to suspect that you're trying to Google them, so you don't want to do that. You want to always let them have their guard down. So don't ever push any point. If, ask once, kind of, not too assertively. If they don't give it to you, don't press it, because you don't want to put them on their guard. That's the best way to get information, is not being too pushy about it. So, but I ended up finding his last name through, luckily he did put a business name there, and I put the business name and the first name, and then it popped up that person's name with the last name. So there I was able to Google him, and I didn't find any criminal record, actually, as it turned out, in my state. It could be, he actually had lived in other states, so, you got to Google, based on my, my previous video. Sometimes you Google in your state, but try to find out if they've lived in other states, because they may have nothing here and they might have something in another state. So, I didn't find any criminal record or anything here in my state, Florida. I mean, I think by now it's no secret that I live in Florida. But with the name, he hadn't even told me that he'd lived in another state, but with the name, and it was not a super common name, fortunately. That's another good thing, because if it was a Jim Smith or a Joe Jones or something, You know, it's a lot harder. But this was a name that was not extremely common. So I found that name who had lived in another state. And, you know, you keep Googling, you find forum posts even, and you find, you know, online things. So what I ended up finding was that a forum post, but you know, it was kind of believable, where apparently, you know, he'd had a very, very vicious fighting with his ex-wife. You know, there was a divorce, custody, vicious custody, but it wasn't anything, I didn't find any actual court records. Maybe where he lived in that state that I'm talking about. I don't even remember at this point because it happened like a year ago. I remember the Olympics was happening, the Summer Olympics, so whenever that was, the last Summer Olympics, and I'll tell you why I remember that. But yeah, I found some vicious, just online arguments with people about his ex-wife and the custody of children, and so it was a bitter situation, I could tell. And then I found someone who had accused him of, but I don't know, it seemed kind of believable that he had stolen several $1,000s using identity theft with someone's credit cards, and, you know, so who knows? Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. No proof. It was just an online argument. So it's all hearsay, you know. But that matched with the way that we were chatting. You know, again, you've got to take different things, different evidence. But then, so that was just all. I was like, okay, ooh, be careful. It could be true that he's a credit card thiever, you know, or a identity, you know, try to use people's identity to do credit card theft, or just using their credit cards without their permission or something. So if we would have gotten into a, you know, yeah, now it's all me just having to protect myself. Whether it's true or not would remain to be seen. But I was already, you know, and I think I found that after our second chat, though. So the second chat was also, he seemed a little in, even before I found all this other stuff online about, you know, the arguing and the custody with the kids and all that. And just, I sensed an underlying anger towards women. You know, and could be because of previous experience, obviously. So I won't blame a man for, in quotes, hating women after having such a bitter battle and divorce. However, you know, it also, I just didn't feel comfortable, you know. And then that came up about, you know, I had Googled but I said, okay, I'm still not going to, you know, I'm not going to let it in. I'm going to, of course, keep it in mind. You know, you have to be careful. But again, I know that it's all, whenever people are getting divorced, each person is going to, many times completely blames the other person and vice versa. So who knows what side is true when it's all just people arguing online. So then there was a third chat, and there was some sort of track meet on the Olympics. There was some sort of track running competition. That's why I remember, because he had only given me his first name. He didn't know that I already knew his last name, and I didn't let him know that I knew his last name. And so we're chatting, and I should look back and see what day it was, but we were chatting, and it must have been a Saturday, I think, because we were supposed to meet Sunday, maybe, so, or maybe it was a Friday, but I wasn't at work, so it must have been, maybe it was after work. See, at this point, it was so long ago, I don't remember. So, but if there are, I think it was a Saturday, because I believe we were supposed to meet Sunday for our, you know, first date. And he said, oh, I'm so nervous. The Olympics are on. You know, one of the things in our chat. And I said, oh, you know, that's great. You nervous? You're a fan of one of the runners? And he said, yes, it's my daughter. and I thought to myself, oh, it could be true. Again, it could be true. But I said, oh, your daughter's running? Wow, that's interesting. And he said the name of the runner, who I don't remember the name, but it was not the last name that I knew his last name was. So, again, and from the, actually, because of his last name, I was able to find out children and wife and kids. And I think, yeah, I had found that he only had 2 kids. And it just, it could be true. Maybe he had a child from a previous relationship, all that, because the person was, his kids were younger, and the person running in the Olympics was an older, a little bit older, in her 20s. So it just didn't sound right to me. I said, yeah, my daughter's running. I'm so nervous about it. And he gave me the name. And it didn't match his last name. Ordinarily, children take their father's last name. And, some people reject the father's last name, and that could be too. But then I started researching on the runner, and there was, I think I looked up her parents, and her parents were 2 other names. And again, it could be that she names her stepfather as her parent, so that's why his name didn't come up. But it just wasn't matching. It just did. I did all the search I could to try to connect him with that runner's name in the Olympic, and it just was not matching, And sometimes people who do these kind of swindles make you believe there's something more important than they really are, and that they're more successful than they really are, so that you won't suspect that they're trying to come after your credit cards or your money or anything. So, I don't know, I was just starting to feel uncomfortable at that point when he said that about the runner. Maybe he was sort of starting to prepare me that he was the father of that runner to make me think that he was in certain circles, or, it could be anything. But I was already uncomfortable from the previous 2 chats. I had found that stuff online. He seemed a bit aggressive. He would get a little bit angry when he appeared to get impatient when I wasn't following his line of thinking, and then he came up with this thing about the Olympic runner. And, I said, oh, okay, well, let's chat later today. The race was over. The person who he claimed was his daughter didn't win. And then we chatted later in the day. I didn't say anything about the Olympics, and then more stuff was bothering me, and I had even asked him when he was talking about kissing me and we really need to kiss and getting too physical too soon, 1 or 2 times I had said it made me feel a little uncomfortable, and he didn't respect that. When a man tells you that you're being unreasonable about what he wants to do to your body, and doesn't, he doesn't respect that and makes you act like you're the one who's wrong, that's a bad sign too. Hey, lighten up. It's just a kiss. He should respect. If those are your limits, okay, maybe I'm a prude. But I don't feel comfortable talking about stuff that early on. And we're only chatting, and he's already, so, he was either hoping, like I said earlier, that he was preparing me so that on the first date he'd get a quick something, quick back to his office, which he had there on the beach, because we were actually going to meet on the beach, because he wanted us to meet on the beach because that was comfortable for him. So, see, all that, putting himself first, he doesn't even have the patience to drive out, a few miles to where I live because he wants to be close to his house, So I just, at that point, I'd had enough. I'd said, no, you know what, I've really been thinking, I'm not going to meet you tomorrow. I got to a point where we started arguing a little bit. I just felt that, I had a right to put my limits. When a man won't allow you to place limits where you're feeling comfortable, and bear in mind, we hadn't even met in person yet. We were only chatting. I was already realizing this is not going to end well. So I just, And yet, coupled together also with that I had read that stuff online about the fights with his wife and how he was an abuser. Some of her friends, a male friend of her, it was a male in one of the arguments that I saw online, saying that he was an abuser and how he had stolen credit cards from someone. And, you know, I wouldn't have, if that had been the only thing that I had seen and one guy saying that he was, okay, then I'd say, okay, well, people take sides during divorce, so that's just his opinion. But my experience also with chatting with him, and it all boiled down to this: there was something wrong here. So I ended up not meeting the guy. I ended up just abruptly ending the chat. I said, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable about meeting you tomorrow, and please don't write to me anymore. And I actually blocked him. But I think I had given him enough chance to show that he wasn't like how it was claimed. But how I was feeling, coupled with someone else had also said certain things in those arguments that I was sort of feeling from the chat that I'd had with him. So that's a bad sign. So that I ended up blocking that man. And there was another gentleman that I chatted with more recently. There was a similar, and oh my gosh, I'll tell you what happened with that guy. I also did not end up meeting him, but it was a similar thing where when you say something, he's telling you that you're unreasonable when you're trying to put limits because you don't feel comfortable. And that guy was talking a little bit more sexually in the chat. The other guy, the first guy was just talking about kissing. He hadn't gone beyond that. But the second guy was talking about a little bit more about the passion that the two people can have when they first meet and all that. And he could tell that I was, talking about how physically he was attracted to me. And it's nice to hear, a little, maybe some of us have a higher tolerance for other. I'd say I have a relatively high tolerance for that. I mean, I don't consider it an assault on me or sexual harassment to point out that I have a nice figure and that, he's very attractive. If you say it once, maybe once or twice. I mean, after all, on a dating site, part of it is physical attraction coupled with trying to find a significant other. But when he gets too into that and not enough into the other stuff, other stuff about getting to actually know each other's things, deeper feelings and all that. A man who's looking for a relationship should be willing to chat more in depth. Or let's say the guy, I understand some people don't like chatting because it takes a lot of effort to be chatting, and if you're not quick with the computer or with typing like I am, I'm a secretary, so I type very quickly. I can understand. Maybe he would prefer to make a phone call. All right, so, but at least on the phone, he should be willing to talk more about things that are important, that would lead towards what a relationship would be based on, rather than just, So the second guy, we still chatted though. He was able to chat. We didn't have to talk on the phone. And he was very pushy, very, similar to what the first guy was. And when I pointed out that it made me a little bit uncomfortable, he said, well, that's because you've never been around an alpha male. Now, first of all, just my opinion again, but if a man is an alpha male, he doesn't need to say he's an alpha male. You can already sense that he's an alpha male. And an alpha male is not aggressive. He may be assertive. He may be more decisive in his decisions, but he's never aggressive to the point where it's almost abusive. An alpha male doesn't need to be abusive. I love an alpha male. I'm completely, now feminists may not like this, but I like the man to take charge, and I wish more men would be that way, where, decisive, take charge, but that doesn't mean aggressive and abusive. It means, this is what I think we should do. But yes, also be open to the woman's opinions and respect her limits. And if it's not a match, if he needs someone more submissive, then okay, it's not a match, and then we just should not continue conversing if it's going to become a relationship. So, you have to find someone who, because relationships are also based on dominance, compatible dominance and submission, you know, preferences. So sometimes people prefer an equal team, where it's an equal, usually in a relationship, you'll switch off. Maybe sometimes one will be more dominant than the other. And then you have preferences. Some people prefer to usually be this more submissive, and one person makes the decisions and the other puts her input in and maybe guides the decisions. That was the traditional role of the woman. It doesn't mean it's, necessarily right, but traditionally the man would be the one who made the final decision, but the woman would guide this decision, and he would take in her opinions, and maybe she would even be slightly, sweetly, some would say manipulative, others would say she would guide him towards what maybe was more appropriate, So, but when the man will not accept your opinion at all, and you're being unreasonable for thinking this way, and your opinion is unreasonable and wrong, and that's abuse. That's he should be willing to, at least listen to your opinion, even if he doesn't agree. If he doesn't agree, that's fine too. But if, again, already in the chat where he's already treating you like that and you haven't even met in person, at least it doesn't work with me. And I believe that is indicative of an abusive person, where, so emotionally abusive. It doesn't mean he's going to hit you, but it could also indicate that he's an aggressive person who knows, if I continue to not agree with him, who knows, maybe he eventually would resort to more extreme measures but it's something that I just wasn't comfortable. So anyway, I'm going on too long. So that man, I ended up, saying that, okay, it's not a match. I didn't block that man, but we ended up deciding after 2 or 3 chats that, he was deciding that he wanted things his way, and I didn't feel comfortable with it, and he was telling me I was unreasonable. I said, okay, well, we don't match, thanks, nice talking to you, good luck in your search. And I did not block him because he actually, said, I actually think he was the one who threw me out, because he was realizing that he wasn't getting his way with me, and he maybe wanted someone that he could. So he ended up telling me that I wasn't good enough, or something like that, something sort of. And I said, okay, at that point, who cares what he thinks about me? I'm not going to argue with him. You're right. I'm not good enough for you, and maybe I need someone else, and whatever. If it's not going to lead anywhere, who cares? He can insult me all he wants. It doesn't bother me. No skin off my nose. So, so I did not block him, but I was, we weren't going to meet. And he was super handsome, though. The picture was super handsome. But, all right, fine. Time wore on. And in the meantime, I was chatting with a girlfriend of mine who's also in a similar situation as me, looking for relationships and all this. So I had suggested to her, go on Bumble. This was on Bumble, and I haven't had much luck there. I've met a few nice guys that haven't led anywhere. I've met a few jerks, but it's another dating site, and maybe try that. So she apparently was on Bumble for a day or two, and then we were texting each other about the guys that we had seen on there. Oh, well, what do you think about? Have you seen this one, that one, the other? She said, oh my gosh, I saw my ex. He's on Bumble, she says to me. I said, oh, really? Which one is he? Maybe I've seen him. I want to make sure to swipe left if I cross paths with him. She said, and she told me his name, his name. And I said, oh my gosh, I said, is he this? And I said his job that he does. And even though these men, you probably never figure out who they are, but I don't want to say their names or anything. I respect their privacy, even though they're idiots. But with her, I said, oh my gosh, was it this guy who works at this place who does this, that believes in, and he also believes like in sort of mystical things, and he had spoken a little bit about that. I said, and he believes in mysticism and all this stuff. And she says, oh my gosh, yes. And she had told me about the guy. She'd never told me his name before. That's him. That's so-and-so that I told you that was so abusive to me that I had to end up, you know. And I said, oh my gosh, I was actually chatting with him, and I ended up thinking he was, thank goodness I didn't end up meeting with him, because that would have also, first of all, it turns out I was right. He's a very abusive man emotionally, and he's also kind of a crazy nut. And she said, yeah, I ended up having to go home in an Uber because he couldn't drive me home. We went out, and he made me go out with him and I think it was a nephew, and then they wanted to go back to his place, and there was no way. They were drunk and they were acting really weird. I was afraid they might rape me if I went back to the apartment with them. And so, I thank goodness my experience at least has protected me from these, situations. I mean, he never did anything bad to her physically, but it did turn out that he was very abusive to her emotionally, just similar to what I was saying. Everything she said, she was wrong and stuff. So that's one, those are some experiences. So neither of these two had actual criminal records, but they'd had some online stuff that you have to be careful of. Okay, thanks for listening, guys. This got a little longer than I expected, but let's see if I might edit out some parts, make it a little shorter. Thanks for listening, and I'll have another story very soon. Bye.